Can you imagine walking into a barn and finding a car so rare that fewer than 20 were ever built? Not a concept, not a prototype that never left the drawing board, but a real, road-going machine that almost nobody alive today has ever seen in person. That's what we're exploring today. Forget the household names for a minute. Forget the '57 Chevy everybody already knows by heart. Today we're digging into the machines that history nearly erased. The one-offs, the almost forgottens, the cars built in numbers so small that owning one isn't just collecting a car, it's owning a piece of automotive folklore. So if you love the smell of old leather, the shine of hand-rubbed lacquer, and stories about cars that time tried to forget, this video was made for you. Hit that like button if you already feel the nostalgia warming up. And subscribe if you want to keep digging up the forgotten corners of automotive history with me. Ready? Let's open the vault. 1954 Kaiser Darrin 161. Before Chevrolet ever dreamed of building a two-seat American sports car, a smaller, scrappier company beat them to the punch. The Kaiser Darrin wasn't born from a giant corporate budget. It was the vision of designer Dutch Darrin, a man who believed America deserved a sports car with real personality. And what personality it had! Its fiberglass body was sculpted with a grille that looked almost like a gentle, knowing smile, and its doors didn't swing open, they slid forward into the front fenders like something out of a spy film. Under that delicate shell sat a modest inline-six engine putting out around 90 horsepower, hardly a powerhouse, but that was never the point. This was a car about elegance and daring design, not brute force. Only 435 were ever produced before the company folded its automotive ambitions entirely, which means every single surviving Darrin today is treated like a fragile artifact by the collectors lucky enough to own one. It wasn't the fastest. It wasn't the loudest. But it may have been the bravest car Detroit, or rather, Michigan's independent scrappers, ever built. 1954 Oldsmobile F-88 concept. Some cars never got the chance to become legends the normal way, through showroom sales and word of mouth. Instead, they became legends because almost nobody ever got to touch one. The Oldsmobile F-88 is exactly that story. Built as a rolling dream, a fiberglass-bodied concept meant to test just how far General Motors could push style and performance in one experimental package, the F-88 packed a 250-horsepower rocket V8 wrapped in a body that looked ready for a spaceport, not a Midwestern dealership floor. It never reached production. Only a handful were ever built, some sources say as few as 4, and most of those were destroyed once GM moved on to its next experiment. When one finally resurfaced decades later and crossed the auction block, it sold for millions, a jaw-dropping number for a car that was never even meant to be sold in the first place. It's proof that sometimes the rarest cars aren't the ones that failed. They're the ones that were never supposed to exist in the real world at all. 1953 Cadillac Eldorado. Before the Eldorado became a full-blown Cadillac dynasty, it started as something almost shockingly exclusive. The very first Eldorado wasn't a mass-market flagship. It was a hand-finished statement piece, built to show the world exactly what Cadillac could do when cost was no object. Its wraparound windshield was one of the first of its kind in America, a design so striking that it would go on to influence an entire generation of automotive styling. Power steering and power brakes came standard at a time when most drivers were still wrestling with heavy manual controls. And beneath that low, sculpted body sat Cadillac's finest engineering of the era. Only 532 of these first-year Eldorados were ever built, each one essentially assembled by hand rather than stamped out on a standard line. Today, a genuine first-year Eldorado in restored condition can command prices well into six figures, a number that reflects not just rarity, but the sheer audacity of building a car this exclusive in an age of mass production. 1955 Hudson Italia. If there's one car on this list that feels like it belongs in a spy thriller set on the Italian coast, it's this one. The Hudson Italia was the product of an unlikely marriage, American mechanical underpinnings dressed in a body sculpted by Italian coach builders, blending two automotive cultures into a single, startling design. Quad headlamps, sweeping lines, and a level of craftsmanship you simply couldn't find on an ordinary American assembly line made the Italia look like nothing else on the road. And that's exactly the problem. It was too expensive, too impractical, and too far ahead of what buyers of the era wanted. Only around 26 examples were ever completed, making it quite possibly the rarest production car built by an American manufacturer in the entire decade. It wasn't a commercial success. It was something better. A gorgeous mistake that collectors today would trade almost anything to own. 1952 Cunningham C-3 Coupe. Briggs Cunningham didn't just want to build cars. He wanted to prove that America could beat Europe at its own game, on its own home turf, at Le Mans. The road-going C-3 Coupe was born from that same racing obsession, combining American V8 muscle with coachwork built across the Atlantic by skilled European craftsmen. The result was a car that looked like nothing else rolling out of Detroit, part racing pedigree, part continental elegance. But building cars this way, hand-finished, low volume, and expensive, was never going to be sustainable. Cunningham built barely 19 of these coupes before the whole venture wound down. Today, it's remembered as one of the rarest American cars in existence, a machine that slipped almost entirely out of public memory until collectors began rediscovering it decades later, hidden away in private collections most people never even knew existed. 1953 Studebaker Commander Starlight Coupe. Not every forgotten car earns its place on this list because of tiny production numbers. Some earn it because the world simply wasn't ready for them yet. The Studebaker Commander Starlight Coupe is one of those cars. Its low, sleek, almost European-looking silhouette looked like it had been beamed in from a decade in the future, all at a time when most American sedans still wore the bulky, upright shapes of the previous era. It didn't shout for attention with chrome and tailfins. It simply looked right, in a way that still holds up today. For years it was overlooked, overshadowed by flashier, more expensive machines. But collectors are only now catching up to what Studebaker's designers understood back in 1953, that true elegance doesn't need decoration to be unforgettable. 1957 DeSoto Adventurer Convertible. DeSoto doesn't exist anymore, and that alone gives this car a kind of ghostly mystique. But in the late 1950s, DeSoto was very much alive, and the Adventurer was its crown jewel. Wrapped in two-tone paint schemes of black or a striking white and gold, and packing a dual-quad Hemi V8 producing 345 horsepower from 345 cubic inches, a rare and deliberate one-to-one match of power to displacement, the Adventurer was built to turn heads and shatter stoplights in equal measure. The convertible version, the rarest of the breed, saw fewer than 500 units ever built. Today, with the DeSoto name itself long extinct, finding one of these convertibles feels like uncovering a message from a brand that vanished before its time, a reminder that some of the boldest engineering of the decade came from companies that simply didn't survive long enough to get their due credit. 1950 Nash-Heeley. Long before anyone had coined the term hybrid sports car, in the sense of blending nationalities rather than powertrains, the Nash-Heeley was already doing exactly that. American mechanical components were shipped across the ocean, fitted into British-engineered chassis, and finished with European-influenced bodywork, creating a car that felt like the product of a handshake between two very different automotive worlds. It even competed at Le Mans, an almost unthinkable feat for an American-badged car in that era. But the complexity and cost of building a car this way in such small numbers made it a financial long shot from day one. Production stayed remarkably limited throughout its short run, and today it stands as one of the strangest, most ambitious international collaborations to ever wear an American nameplate. 1950 Muntz Jet. Earl "Madman" Muntz was a television and electronics salesman with absolutely no business building cars, and that's exactly what makes this story so good. Buying up an existing sports car design and reworking it into something wilder, Muntz stuffed his creation with an interior that felt more like a mobile lounge than a driver's cockpit, leather seats, a built-in radio, and an attitude that dared you to take it seriously. It wasn't reliable. It wasn't cheap to build. And it certainly wasn't a smart business decision. But it was unforgettable, a genuine oddity born from pure ambition and a complete disregard for what a normal car company was supposed to look like. Very few were ever completed, and most people today have simply never heard of it, which is exactly why it belongs on this list. 1956 Packard Caribbean. We'll close with a swan song. By the mid-1950s, Packard was fighting for its life, but it went down swinging with style. The Caribbean was drenched in 2- and 3-tone paint combinations, gold-plated trim, and an interior stacked with features most cars of the era didn't even offer: power everything, and in some cases even air conditioning. Underneath, a V8 paired with a smooth automatic transmission and a self-leveling rear suspension gave it a ride quality that felt like floating rather than driving. Only a few hundred were built in its final years, each one a quiet, defiant statement from a once great American name, refusing to disappear without one last moment of glory. So tell me, which of these forgotten legends surprised you the most? Was it the spaceship that never made it to showrooms, or the Italian-American love affair that only lasted 26 cars? Drop your pick in the comments, and if you know a forgotten classic that deserves its own spotlight, tell us about it below. Your stories are how these cars stay alive. And if rarity isn't enough for you, if you want raw, unfiltered speed, don't miss our video on the fastest American cars of the 1950s. Because behind every rare badge, there's usually an engine that had something to prove. I'll see you there.